Germs, they're everywhere and they're always trying to kill you. Right now, as you sit at your computer or watching on your phone, all manner of deadly germs are crawling all over you. Your hands, your chest, your face, in your mouth. There's nowhere they can't reach. Right this second, you have a 25% chance of carrying deadly Staphylococcus bacteria, of staph infection infamy. Luckily for you though, much like your own farts, your staph bacteria are generally harmless to you. But staph bacteria from another person can give you a deadly infection. And if you're wondering where it lives, well, that answer is pretty much everywhere, to include your skin, eye, nose, and mouth. Generally though, it's bacteria that doesn't normally live on the human body that's deadly. And throughout history, mankind has been decimated by all forms of plagues. But what were the deadliest plagues in history? Native American smallpox. Back in the 15th century, Europeans who weren't Vikings discovered the New World, and shortly after the discovery they made friends with the local natives, and nothing bad ever happened after that. Just kidding. Europeans very quickly got to work on their favorite historical pastime, subjugating and brutalizing native populations. This time though, they had some extra help in the form of all manner of bacteria and viruses that Native Americans had never encountered before. Back when healthcare consisted of draining bad blood out and then dying of the resulting infection, smallpox killed about 1 in 3 Europeans who got infected. Native Americans, however, had little to no resistance to the disease, and thus when they made contact with Europeans, the disease very quickly decimated Native American society. It's believed that between 1500 and 1900, European diseases killed up to half of all Native Americans, and most of that was purely by accident. It wasn't until the 1800s that the U.S. cavalry got the idea of handing out smallpox-infected blankets to Native Americans who were stubbornly settling on the land the U.S. had rightfully claimed thousands of years ago when man first arrived to North America but forgot to tell everyone about it. Cholera pandemic. Cholera is one of those diseases that just never goes out of style. It's a die-hard classic, a real crowd pleaser, and to date there's been 7 told cholera pandemics throughout human history. The deadliest, however, is considered to be the third, which struck between 1852 and 1860. For thousands of years, mankind paid little attention to the quality of its drinking water, and for nearly all of human history, literally nobody saw a problem with having your sewage run right next to or into your drinking water supply. This worked out great for all manner of diseases, who took advantage of the terrible sanitation to wreak havoc on mankind. Cholera is one such disease, and during its third outbreak, it's believed that it started its world comeback tour in India. With the Ganges River being one of the most important in the world as far as human settlements are concerned, it has long been one of the most polluted. In 2011, a report on the water quality of the river revealed that the water contained 1.1 billion fecal bacteria per 100 milliliters. That's about 500,000 times the recommended bathing limit. Add to that the practice of cremating corpses directly on the banks of the river and India's huge population, of which a large amount believe it's a sacred experience to bathe in the poop-filled river, and it's little surprise that cholera has frequently struck the region. During the third outbreak, though, cholera first struck in India, then spread to Afghanistan and slowly across to Russia, where it killed an estimated 1 million people. From Russia, it made its way to Europe and to Africa, finally landing on the shores of America. Antonine Plague. Back in 165 AD, Rome had about 200 good years left in her, and the plague that struck her from 165 to 180 AD is believed to have hastened her downfall. Today, nobody knows exactly what disease struck the Romans, as back then doctors were just as likely to feed you mercury to cure your cough or give you mercury for your back pain. Seriously, those guys loved mercury, and it's little surprise so many prominent Romans were crazier than a barrel of angry monkeys. With an estimated death toll of 5 million, whatever plague struck the Romans, it was clearly devastating, and symptoms included fever, diarrhea, and inflammation of the throat. In some cities, up to 1/3 of the population succumbed to the plague, and today historians believe that the culprit was either measles or smallpox. Luckily today, we don't have to worry about either of those two devastating diseases thanks to vaccines. Except yes, we do, because anti-vaxxers have refused to vaccinate their children, leading to modern outbreaks of diseases mankind had all but eradicated. Third, bubonic plague. If cholera is a classic, the bubonic plague is a downright golden oldie. If you've seen our previous episode on the Black Death, you'll know that this disease is caused by a nasty little bacteria who likes to take over your lymph nodes and then literally makes your body kill you. In 1850, Chinese prospectors and entrepreneurs flooded the western Yunnan region in search of minerals and ores. Soon the population had exploded to over 7 million, and this created the perfect conditions necessary for the plague to revisit humanity. Plague-infected fleas were soon biting all manner of people, acting as the primary vector between the yellow-breasted rat and humans. When Han Chinese and Hui Muslim miners got into armed conflict over the mineral wealth of the area, the plague exploded onto the scene. Thanks to the displacement of huge populations due to armed conflict, the plague made its way east toward China's shores. There, it would kill 100,000 people in Hong Kong and 60,000 in Canton. Aboard trade ships, the disease made its way to India, where it would go on to kill 10 million. Over the next 30 years, it would kill another 12.5 million. On a bright note, the restrictive actions of the British government in trying to contain the plague would foster much of the discontent that would later lead to an Indian independence movement. Plague of Justinian. 400 years after the Antonine Plague, rats in a grain shipment from Egypt brought the deadly bubonic plague back to Europe. In 541 AD, half of the population of Constantinople, then the capital of the Western Roman Empire, died to the plague, and from there the disease spread across Europe. Incredibly, historians believe that the bubonic plague actually prevented the rise of a new Roman Empire, as it weakened the Western Roman Empire so severely that it was unable to triumph over the Goths and reunite the Eastern Roman Empire with the West into a new Roman Empire. After killing between 25 and 100 million across Europe and Asia, the plague once more faded, though it would return sporadically until the last outbreak in 750 AD. As if killing hundreds of millions of people throughout history wasn't bad enough, we also have the bubonic plague to blame for the failure of Constantinople to reunite the Roman Empire, and there's no telling what the world of today might look like if a unified Rome had averted the Dark Ages. HIV/AIDS. Ask anybody who grew up in the 80s what the most feared acronym they ever heard was, and they'd tell you without hesitation, it's AIDS, a disease originating in Africa. It first struck the civilized world in a major fashion in America, where it was initially identified in homosexuals. This unfortunately led to the stereotype that HIV or AIDS was only a gay disease, and thus a lack of safe sex techniques between heterosexuals quickly led to the disease infecting millions around the world. Today, 600 people a day contract HIV, and in some parts of Africa, as much as 15% of the population is infected. As of 2017, 39 million people already have died of HIV, out of 76.3 million who have been infected. Thanks to safe sex practices and education, infection rates have finally slowed, and the world seems to be on the other side of the peak of the HIV pandemic, though not by far. New treatments offer ways to cope with the disease and even prevent its outbreak from HIV into AIDS, but these treatments are expensive, and the populations that need them the most, poor third world individuals, simply can't afford them. A failure to treat these vulnerable populations inevitably leads to infections across the rest of the world thanks to our modern interconnected world. Standing for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, AIDS is a condition caused by the human immunodeficiency virus or HIV. AIDS can take years to manifest, but when it does, it's characterized by HIV's aggressive attacks against the immune system, destroying white blood cells and T cells, which help fight off infections. Your immune system is constantly working to keep you healthy, and our environment is swarming with all manner of harmful bacteria, viruses, and fungi, which are looking to turn you into a snack. Without your immune system working properly, AIDS leads to death from all matter of secondary infections and, unless treated early, is almost certainly fatal. Spanish flu. At the end of World War I, Europe was in a sorry state. The war had ravaged the countryside and displaced millions of people. Food supplies were low and clean drinking water was rare. Add to that huge numbers of dead and the concentration of wounded still being treated in makeshift hospitals, and you had conditions ripe for a pandemic. Despite having nothing to do with Spain or the Spanish flu struck soon after the end of the war and appeared almost simultaneously in Boston, USA, Brest, France, and Freetown, Sierra Leone. Thanks to air and ocean travel, the flu virus spread around the world. Yet the flu virus was not a particularly different strain of the same flu you might catch today. All flu viruses mutate over time, but despite what people initially thought, this was not some superbug. The poor sanitary conditions, the concentration of wounded troops in massive field hospitals, and poor nutrition for wartime populations had instead created a world just ripe for the flu to become truly deadly. The most at risk were the young and elderly, but with so many combat wounded and malnourished civilians, the flu is thought to have killed between 50 and 100 million. The Black Death. To date, there has been no epidemic more deadly than the Black Death or the bubonic plague, though it should be noted that the disease had struck many times before it went to blockbuster in 1347. Arriving from the plains of Central Asia, where climate change was forcing infected rodents into human population centers, the plague quickly spread from Asia westward toward Europe, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Across the Islamic world, the Black Death killed millions after arriving in Egypt from Constantinople. All told, the outbreak killed between 75 to 200 million people, and it took humanity 2 whole centuries to recover the lost numbers. The disease inflamed major tensions across various social groups, and shortly after the plague receded in 1353, major violence against minorities in Europe exploded, as everybody from gypsies to Jews were blamed for the seemingly supernatural plague. On the bright side, though, the plague killed so many people that it created a massive labor shortage, and this left nobles without enough peasants to work their lands. With the bargaining chips firmly on their side, the peasantry was able to use the value of their labor to demand better wages and living conditions, laying the foundations for many of the major labor movements that would redefine European and world history in later centuries. Without the Black Plague and its deadly impact on humanity, modern labor movements that brought us the 2-day weekend, sick days, paid vacation, and other perks we enjoy and expect from jobs today may never have existed. Do you think we're due for another major plague? How would you survive a major outbreak of disease? Let us know in the comments, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content before we're all dead.